All right, there we go. Crowns and Crows back after 2 weeks. Couple notes at the top of the show. My mic is, I think, now working. Hopefully, we got a couple announcements we want to make. A couple things. A list of laundry to do, so to speak. We're going to every other week as far as the schedule because the development of the game, I don't want to say it's slowed down because it certainly hasn't slowed down, but it's not as newsworthy as it once was, and I think every other week we're going to have a pretty decent show, I think, with information rather than kind of stretching some lore updates and you listen to us bitch and moan for 10 minutes about lack of updates. So we're going to go to every other week, same time, same date. So I think that's better for all of us and for you guys. If you want a show every week, maybe we can set something up where we kind of do an informal after show once a week. Maybe one of us will come on, we'll interact with the community and the crowd if there's a demand for it. I have no problem hopping on, kind of doing something at random. But so if you want to do that, tweet at us and we'll look it over, or you could post in the forum thread and we'll do a couple things. Also, Valor is not going to be on the show anymore. He's taking a hiatus, personal hiatus. He's got some things in his real life that he needs to tackle. He's perfectly healthy and everything else like that. It's not like he's got cancer and he's dying somewhere, whatever. He's got some responsibilities he needs to take care of, so he's going to take a step back and rearrange things. I'm sure he's going to pop in every once in a while because he's going to miss everybody. Plus, I'm going to completely screw up the Twitter feeds and the social media and everything else that he's built up over the last year, and he's going to have to yell at me for doing all that stuff. So, what? Valor's there watching us now. See, he couldn't stay away. Couldn't stay away. I'm probably watching us over the phone. Lakes was supposed to be on tonight, but some of that military training kind of came into effect earlier today, so he couldn't make it. So you got, somebody said it in Twitch chat, the Double D, Joe, Draegan, and the Doc. So I haven't been on the show for a month, and I've been talking for a while. You guys had a special guest last week.
Yeah, last week we got to talk directly with Blair on the show, which was super awesome. And he went into some extra details about essentially the big December reveal, the one we had all been waiting for.
Yes, and I could not make the show because I had family over for the holidays. And special note, just in case Blickstev wants to yell at me because he banished his family away from the computer to do the interview with us. I have 2 small kids. My sister has 2 small kids, and it was the only day last week where we can get away with a babysitter to go out and have a couple drinks and a dinner. So my wife would have killed me if I took away a night of freedom from children away from her. So I had to go out. But you, Lakes, and Valor did an excellent job talking with Thomas. Why don't for the show, I want to give my opinion of the update, and we're going to kind of hash through things and maybe do whatever. So why don't you start off with your overall impressions now that you've had about, I guess, 2 weeks to kind of think about it. Has anything changed? Has anything popped in your head since then?
Yeah, I will say the thing that has mostly come up in my head since then is I'm what's the word? Nervous? No, I still have a lot of confidence in them, but one thing that makes me wonder is that change, making it so that respawns and the class you're using are another resource. Sounds like they're coming up with a really big economy that they're going to have to balance. And I think that's probably the one thing I didn't mention on the last show, and sort of the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, wow, this is going to require, number one, a really good crafting system, really good economy tools, really good import and export rule balance. So we'll see how that works, I think. I'm not necessarily concerned so much as impressed that they're taking on a challenge of that size to add yet another thing to what already sounded like a pretty big economy.
Now, I mean, we spent, 4 or 5 shows trying to think of what the hell this update was.
Easily.
And we basically glanced over the most simple, obvious answer of what it actually is. They've been talking about how they want to make this an EVE-like game. And they did that just right off the bat. I wasn't surprised by the update, and it was just kind of like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And why did I not think of that? And when we were talking about the interview with Thomas, we were kind of go over what kind of topics we can discuss, what kind of questions. My first question was, why was this not in the Kickstarter? Because it's to me, it's something that's like, this is like the basis of your whole game.
Right.
Did you guys get a chance to ask that, or did you kind of just hop right into everything? I didn't notice.
I
don't
good
remember.
question. I think mostly the answer was just I don't think it really came up until they started really hammering out some of the design. And as Blair likes to say, they shake the tree and see what falls out. And one of the holes was that they just didn't know exactly what they were going to do with some of these classes and the experience of how a character actually works for a person. So I guess it must have not been something that came up in time.
Well, here's a couple things that I'm really, I don't want to say concerned about, but I'm intrigued on how they handle. I mean, you mentioned you have to have a really complex crafting system. I don't think they have to have a complex crafting system.
Maybe not complex, but quality.
Well, I mean, when I say complex, or when you say quality, I'm not talking about the mechanics of actually crafting, where there's some crazy EverQuest 2 Vanguard type of craziness. I mean, I still want click a button and you make something once you have the materials, but the infrastructure needs to be in place for a proper now. Not only are you creating buildings and other things and upgrading those type of things, you're making gear and all that sorts. You're making ammunition, which we'll come up with. We'll talk about a little later in the show in regards to the Ranger update. Now you're making these vessels with different levels of quality and et cetera. Now, did they mention that the now I can't think of the term. What's the item that you slot in the vessels with? Disciplines.
You can. Vessels can have disciplines applied to them, I guess.
So, I mean, everything's coming together where you just have to create. They're basically making a fantasy version of Eve that people have been loving or wanting for a decade now, and they just need to nail the combat, which I'm happy that they're kind of reiterating on. We found out in today's Q&A that, it was locked in stone. No, it's all fluid. So I'm happy with that. So, you start off, go right back to the original. Who was the first, quote-unquote celebrity dev that was brought onto the project? And that was Raph. And he's in charge. He's one of those guys that loves creating systems, game systems, and social behavior within games. And if it was just going to be a simple crafting gear and simple things like that, why do you bring in Raph? You just kind of create a system in place, and not that it's simple, but this extra element of the game brings a lot of other gaming systems together, which kind of perfectly suits for a guy of his SWG stature, which is usually the one game everybody talks about when it comes to crafting. So now, getting on to the elements of the system. Here's my main concern from a technical point of view. Now, instead of picking an archetype, you just play your character and you can choose whatever vessel you want, like a ship. A vessel is a ship, so that was not lost upon me. How fast are they going to be able to turn out archetypes in a game like this? I mean, they said they're going to launch with 13, and when you compare Eve with all their ship types and levels of tiers of ships, you create the art for the ship. It's not animated, and it just pews lasers. Are they going to be able to create archetypes, animations, gear, textures, etc., 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 at a decent pace with this small team?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think even I don't remember if it was Blair or Todd, but one of them said that they really want this to be a foundation for the ability to keep building more archetypes and expanding the game world that way. Which I wouldn't say surprised me so much as the emphasis they put on it does suggest that's going to take a lot of resources, and that's going to be a big part of where the game expands, after the release that they, sort of downplayed in their latest Q&A.
Well, I mean, it does make sense where in a typical PvE or typical MMO, whether it's PvE or PvP, you're constantly developing new content for players to play in the game. New raids, new dungeons, new classes that are much more complex in MMO because you have 80 levels worth of this, that, and the other. Now, if they can nail the world building aspect and the random kind of generating type of aspect of it, the content's already created, the players are there. You could probably spend the normal amount of resources they would on creating the PvE content into developing archetypes for the game.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that we'll see that not only can this vessel system just be look, we can make 100 different archetypes that you can, swap in and out of. I'm hoping that some of the things they hinted at, like maybe there are not, vessels don't necessarily have to be a archetype. Maybe they'll do siege vehicles or temporary heroes that you can inhabit the body of, uniquely in a campaign. I'm hoping to see that vessel system definitely expand. That's where even my concern about is this economy getting bigger going to cause more problems than it solves. I think that at least just the conceptual idea of the vessels sounds like it'll add a lot of opportunities.
Well, I mean, you have to be careful and balance on the age of a game and the amount of options that you have. I mean, right. You can certainly reuse animations because, you could have your standard warrior class, which is, or knight class with a shield, but have different kind of knights and kind of reuse the animations to make them a little bit bigger, different color,
right.
Whatever you want to do. Exactly. And, you have your basic knight, and then you can train him up and you can get the different promotion classes with him. And so you have those are essentially vessels all on their own, I would imagine. And it can kind of make different tiers of the vessels because he did say there's going to be like the green, blue, purple versions of them.
Exactly.
The one thing I didn't quite grasp was all the disciplines. Are those going to be craftable and interchangeable, much like hard points in a?
That's essentially what it sounds like to some degree. I think you'll have to commit a little more, It sounds like you won't be just, I applied my discipline rune to this vessel, and then I'll just take it off and put it on my next vessel. But it does sound like that the hardpoint concept is relatively applicable.
Yeah. So somebody's complaining about the chat screen, and I agree. I've been wrestling with that. So I'll change that for next time. The one thing I'm interested in is how they develop these vessels going forward. Right now we have what do you have on your heart bar? 10 slots, I think. It's usually about 6 or 7 abilities and 3 empty spots for disciplines. I think that they need to now take the advice of what a lot of us were talking about in previous shows and limit the amount of skills they have, or have 30 skills for each archetype but limit the spaces to 4. And because I like the diversity of the disciplines being slotted in, like it completely changes your ship and your loadouts in EVE. I think they might need to change that a little bit. And it's a simple UI change, I think, but I'd like to see that game balanced around that.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if they did that. I think they'd end up definitely more people would accuse them of being a MOBA if you got to too few abilities and too many archetypes.
Well, your disciplines could be abilities too. Right. I mean, like in EVE, your ship is completely empty. You've got 1 through. You can hotkey your weapons, and they're typically your ship doesn't do anything. It has inherent stats like it can, it has an CPU capacity and this, that, and the other, and it's a myriad of different options that you can place in there. The archetype system with the vessels is a little bit more simple. I would like to see a little bit more flexibility built into it, rather than you get 3 and then you're baked in 6 or 7 abilities.
Right.
But
maybe I could definitely see that. It'll be interesting to see though with already having the archetypes and the promotion classes. There it is.
Yes, promotion.
The promotions. How much that affects things, and whether those will share a lot of abilities with their base one or replace all 6 could also have a big impact on that. So I guess we'll see.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think they know for sure how things are going to go, so I think they're going to do a lot of testing with that. I mean, overall, it's a pretty... the system makes sense to me, and I was very happy that they were going to do it, because playing one archetype forever really sucks. And that answers our question from, gosh, probably like 3 or 4 months ago, where we're like, all right, what happens when they make a new archetype, and do you have to now level up all your skills all over again and all this other stuff? It's no,
Right.
you keep everything, and you just get a new vessel and take her for a spin and start training up that class's or that archetype's base skills and kind of level it up that way. So I think that does a lot of good for the longevity of the game. Also, you're not locked in everything into one character
Yeah.
slot.
I think that's the part that everyone generally is excited for, is no longer this concept of like, you're going to have 3 heroes and that's it, and one's going to have to be locked into a campaign, and good luck with all the rest. I think all the other details, there's a lot of people having lots of debates about them, but I think everyone pretty much agrees that at least allowing more flexibility for a player is good.
No,
in that
absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look in the market today, and I don't know if the guys at ArtCraft purposely did something like this or what, but they're hitting the marketplace with this kind of hardcore, quote-unquote, hardcore gaming, which I don't think it's
Right.
hardcore anymore in today's market, because if you take a look at Steam, somebody brought this up in one of the message boards that I was on. If you take a look, some of the most popular games right now are H1Z1, Rust, Ark, and another myriad of and that has about 250,000 to 500,000 players concurrently
Right.
most of the time. And what are those games? They're session-based games where you have full loot. Some of them have permadeath. Some of them allow you to build stuff, and then when you go to bed, somebody can blow it up. But they have people playing that constantly. So there is
Right.
a niche market. I mean, it's not like it might not be 5 million players, and I don't think they ever thought they were going to get 5 million players with this. But there is definitely a game space out there that's for PvP, permadeath, or full loot with destruction of personal property when you log out. Basically, you're not safe 24/7 on the game
Right.
that you're playing. So
Exactly.
I think I got hung up on the reveal hints about might be too hardcore for people. I don't think it's that hardcore, because there's proof of it in the marketplace right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other valid concern I've heard that maybe goes with the too hardcore is if your archetype and your base stats of your character become like, if there's that much more gear that you can lose by dying, does the gap between the easy bands and the hardcore bands become that much bigger? And that is another concern I've heard and sort of share, and I understand at least the reasoning for, is like, it was already hard to imagine how the economy would balance between the dregs and the upper bands, and you're just making them further apart if at the dregs you can lose even the good vessels, and so
Well,
so
I
it'll be
think
interesting to see how that happens.
I think if you're just a strict dreg player, I think that you're going to just see lots of microeconomies pop up.
Yeah.
And some of the quote-unquote good vessels, they're going to have to. I mean, these are not exactly what ifs, but they're just kind of solutions to, like, in outer bands where you can import things. Maybe you can start importing
Right.
some more valuable assets to build some of those more powerful vessels. Like
Exactly.
for basically in Eve, if you're going to use the Eve example, if you're starting a brand new Eve, everybody has to start mining and then building up and training and then saving up for that Titan that the guild wants you to
Right.
do, whatever,
Exactly.
which takes months upon months of times to build. In a outer band, you can vastly accelerate that because you probably have the skills already to craft it, but then you could bring in those really good materials. Versus the dregs, you might not be able to get those materials in time, so you might not see those quote-unquote top-end vessels if there's like a Titan equivalent in Crowfall. So there might be different things they could do to accelerate spawn rates, increase rarity drops, or make rare materials more common, or whatever. So
that'll definitely be interesting to see if the dregs just becomes sort of like everyone's just using the base vessels, no one's got any fancy stuff because it's not worth risking and losing it, and they're all just trying to export it for the other stuff. Who knows?
Yep, that's the one part of the game that I'm really looking forward to seeing is basically how do you win a game? how do you play the game, and how does each like I like the idea of being able to hop on and start fresh and play it for a couple months and then it wipe and start all over again, because I'm not a hardcore player anymore is when it comes to time. So there's periods of my life where I can get, you know, a week or two in of really playing a lot, and some days I can't. So
Exactly.
I like starting off fresh. On the other hand, you have a lot of people that like to keep all their shiny shit. And
Yeah.
there's going to be a whole EK kind of rotational type of thing.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm looking forward to how the game dynamics work on a macro level, because right now we're just getting the bits and the modules
Exactly.
of the game.
Exactly. And I think that's an interesting. I hope this won't be too vague without a long explanation. But there was an interesting conversation I had with another individual in the community recently about this, where the more I hear about some of these systems and about the development of the economy, the more I actually imagine that the game will work really well if the safe bands where you can import and stuff are the quote-unquote important ones to a large portion of the community, and the dregs just becomes where the hardcore people play as sort of mercenaries for the sole sake of exporting as many resources as possible for the people that need those resources. Which will be interesting to see if it develops that way, rather than, I think when we first heard about it, I imagined that it would. I think a lot of people, in fact, imagined that the dregs would be where all the real people were, and then there was just a bunch of kids in the other ones. Mm-hmm. But I think the more I think about it, the economy is going to make a lot more sense if you have, you know, tons of people competing for the big, massive order, chaos, battles, victories, and the dregs are just the guilds that, you know, all they want is to kill each other and to win win the battle.
Yep.
And win the rewards. And they're not worried about, oh, let's make sure we have all of the best vessels and the best gear. Let's just get our best players in and kill people before they can get any of that.
Now, before I go on to comment on what you just said, did they say that some of the higher end materials or the more rare ones come from the dregs?
Yes.
Okay, so there's that there, right? That's been said.
Promise, generally speaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there has to be a way for this game not to survive, but to become a little bit more popular, rather than just like, you know, you've got your less risk-adverse people on the upper bands kind of just churning around and around and around, and then you have the dregs people going around and around and around, but there's no interaction between any of them. They're just all playing separate games. It might as well be a game list of saying difficulty level green all the way down to red, and you just pick where you want to play, and there's no interaction.
Exactly.
So since they're very keen on Eve and really trying to make this a fantasy-based Eve, why not have where the outer bands from, let's say, the easiest, whatever the band is called on the outer end, is the equivalent of 1.0 space in Eve, where basically there's no PvP and you can go around and mine all day. Maybe that's the EK. I don't know. Whatever point you want to make.
Right.
And then dregs is 0.0 space, where everything fucking can go on.
Pretty much.
And I think there'd be a mistake if the dregs is basically anything can happen and it's just, you know, free for all PvP. I think that'll be a mistake.
Sure.
I think they need to take some of the other kind of game elements, like order, chaos, balance, and the faction stuff, and stick that in the quote-unquote dreg section, and just have like as a difficulty rating or the different type of side organizations, so to speak, and then make the rule sets or the risk versus reward gradient go across everything else like that, independent of the organization
like game
type.
Mode and
Exactly.
Team choices.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make a lot of sense, because I think my biggest concern for a long time, and this is part of where my concern for the economy comes, is that if the most hardcore rule set is going to end up risking that much of their resources, then there's going to need to be an incentive for them to export resources and not just use them all for fighting. So to do that, there has to be sort of a feedback loop up to the people who are safer, who can hoard those resources and who want them and want to build them up over time, compared to the people in the dregs who are at most going to hold on to resources for the course of a single campaign, because after that, they can't import into the next dregs anyways. So why does it? Why do they even need to take stuff out?
That's why. That's why I think that there might be a way to ghost into other games potentially, especially or end early without penalty or some. I mean, it goes against a lot of the things they've said, but I can't. There has to be a reason to, or there has to be a way to basically connect all players together. That's just not like, hey, let's have a pretty EK and a pretty house and then ignore it, just play the game constantly. There has to be some kind of... And I think we were talking about that on some guesswork of what the big reveal was going to be, but that did not come to fruition. So we... Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just going to sort of say, and I think that they are aware of that for the most part, and I think that there's still more to... There's obviously still more to the game that we don't know about.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so the big reveal we talked about, it's essentially vessels are now like spaceships in Eve. They've got stats in it, or attributes. I'm going to fuck that up from here on eternity because it means different things to...
Stattributes.
Stattributes, exactly. They've got stuff on them that could be better or worse. There's different grades, different vessels. You got to make them, and you can trade them, and it's another part of the economy. And that's basically the big reveal. We just turned from typical MMO to Fantasy Eve in a heartbeat like that, and I like it. So I'm generally thumbs up with that update. So I don't think there's really anything else to really hash out until we learn about rarity and how these things are built and how you can customize them. Because all we know right now, 7 abilities, 3 slots, and that's just kind of placeholder at this point.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to transition to... I want to make one statement where they were talking about how game controls and combat a couple weeks ago, they pushed back Siege Perilous to work on combat a little bit more. Yeah, they were trying to do the client-based updates. I have not had a time to get on to the latest updates, so hopefully by 2 weeks from now I can get into a game and spend some time checking out how the game is progressing on that point, because to me that's the most important thing, I think. Mr. Blair said a lot of good things in one of his 2 updates ago on what he wants to do as far as locking the reticle, strafing, and all that other stuff, because it really tightens up the control. It really felt like I was playing a spaceship game. I think I mentioned that.
Really small comment. I think that the idea that you will alternate between a combat aiming mode and a non-combat mode is going to be awesome and potentially lead to awesome things. Calling it here live. I think non-combat versus combat mode has potentially other really cool implications, so I'm excited to see if that evolves more over time. Yeah,
it should. I mean, they could do a lot of things with it. I mean, combat itself is a pretty simple thing to do, but it's incredibly difficult to get it to do the simple things you want it to do, if that makes any sense.
Exactly.
There's basically... You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of games out there that you can emulate if that's what you want to do. You have Terra, you have FPS games, you have action RPGs for the console. You've got all these games that do things wonderfully. You just have to pick out a style that you want and you think your players want. The hard part is actually making it fucking work the way you want it to, so I won't even touch into that. I just found it very strange what they had originally set in place, because no other action RPG kind of worked that way, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, or at least the ones that I've played recently. So I'm happy to see that they're going to do all the things that I was commenting on, and I look forward to them getting that, kicking ass and whatever. Because right now the game last time I played was very difficult to play for me, only because my client was so fucked up that I couldn't control my character anyway. So.
Exactly.
I wasn't a good person to comment at to begin with, but in any case, so they're working on that. I'm very, very happy that they're delaying some other things to get the combat right. So high five to everybody on that one. So last part, we were talking about this during the pre-show. The latest update was the announcement of the Ranger, which is nothing new, and I think that we're gonna not comment on what we think the Ranger is or what the Ranger's place is going to be until maybe we just see their release of all the ability kind of stuff like that. That's when we'll kind of dig deep into it. But you did have one comment before the show. Let's bring that up.
Yeah, I want to say for on record that I'm a little disappointed, and it's not a lot of information yet, but I'm a little disappointed with the ammunition system sounding like just a very standard, like old school. You have X arrows and you shoot them with your bow. And if you run out, you're switching to melee or something.
Right.
I had envisioned this very specific system that I remember fighting long and hard on the forums for, wasting my time.
I should say that's probably a very fruitful experiment.
I'm sure it was such a good plan to do that. But I was hoping, I loved that they said, oh, this is a hybrid melee and ranged character, and what I've envisioned for that for a while, and I haven't seen a game really do effectively, was something where it wasn't like you could run out of ammo and now you're just permanently melee until you find more ammo. I was hoping for something where maybe reloading your ammunition, like you have X number of shots in your quiver, you can reload your quiver, but reloading is slow, leaves you vulnerable in combat, and so if someone gets the jump on you, once you're out of shots, you're going to need to do melee until you can get back and reload. But don't limit the reloading. Keep that mechanic as just a core, interesting mechanic of the character. Don't make it a system where you have to manage something that it's impossible to regenerate at all without going elsewhere and regrouping with a whole town or a merchant or a crafter or something like that. It's not a bad system, though, don't get me wrong. And I know the very obvious counter-argument that people are going to say is like, it's more standard and other games do it and it works, so why do you care so much? And I guess it was just I was really hoping that they would think outside the box more for their ammunition system.
I don't think it's your idea is out of the box. I think it's just another way of doing it.
Yeah, sure.
Just to play devil's advocate, I think it's really, for certain class design, I think it's really hampering that if your one line of attack is based off an item in your inventory, that you'll lose access to your class's powers or abilities or whatever you want to call them, because you run out. It's kind of not fun. But on the other hand, it really depends on the inventory system. So if your quiver can hold 20 arrows, but you can hold a stock of them in your inventory, just constantly reload them, it essentially turns into the system that you want. You just have to have a large amount of stuff in your inventory.
Right.
Where this works well in EVE is because you have your cargo hold and you can stack 10,000 bullets in there and call it a day.
Exactly.
However, in Crowfall, if they go the reality route, where it's impossible to hold more than 100 arrows, and that we're only going to stack them to 100, and you only have 10 inventory slots, and that kind of screws you over, then I'm going to be slightly inclined to not play a ranger, because why play a ranger for damage when you could just play a mana-based class that just regenerates mana anyway for range damage.
Right.
So it depends.
And that's sort of my concern. Like I think it was one of those things that's always been done because it's obvious. It's the way it works in real life. You have X number of arrows, and if you run out, you're out. But when you think about things like the quality of life experience of gamers, and you think about things like crafting, and it's like, do I craft hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of arrows, or could we have made a system where I craft a quiver, and a quiver will lose durability if I'm taking damage, if I'm dying, and we'll lose a little bit of durability when shooting, and then all I have to do is maintain one quiver in my inventory, not like, I forgot I had 900 arrows, I thought I had 1,000, and now, or I wasted space in my bag. It's like you're right, they kind of are the same thing in the end. And so that's where it's like, why not just simplify it?
Because ammunition adds another aspect into the economy. Now, where it helps in EVE is that you can craft all your ammunition, you put it on an auction house or a base to sell, and it's part of the marketplace. Because that makes sense. Everybody has a computer, you can see that, blah, 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 blah. In Crowfall, I doubt they're going to have auction house systems. So you're going to have to either shop around, have a shitload in your castle, bank, whatever system that they have, and all of a sudden you run out. Now you have to go do shopping for a couple hours, which is kind of lame. So It really depends on what the game systems are like for trading, so to speak. If they do like the Korean route where you have a shopkeeper NPC where you can go around and find your ammunition, that's good. Because
Right.
if I'm playing and I run out of arrows or I just have a big battle, I don't have to pause from gameplay and then go shopping and going on a chat channel. Want to buy 10,000 arrows? Please send tell, and then like do that
Right.
shit for hours. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't going to be in those giant guilds where they're crafters and you have a guild bank somewhere and it's got a billion arrows in it and everybody's happy. Or I'm forced to play another vessel. So another way
Yeah.
they can kind of balance that out is if warriors or champs or whatever have to sharpen their swords after a while, or you start losing damage.
Right.
I mean, there could be certain things like that, which basically balance out, like you need to buy certain whetstones, and the whetstones run out after time, and it just simulates the whole arrow thing. And then, again, I'm not really playing devil's advocate because there's good points on either side, because then it turns around, so why bother having any of that shit? Just let people fucking play, but then you're taking elements of the game out, too, from it. So it's kind of, you got to balance out pain in the ass to, like,
Exactly.
fun.
And I think, and I wanna say for sure, I don't want any situation in which the archer just doesn't have a resource that they have to manage. I am all for crafters making something that is what allows me to shoot. But that, to me, that's why not just? Ultimately, my position is like, why not make it the same as the other classes, where like I make one axe for one warrior. And if they let it deteriorate too much, they'll need one more axe. Whereas the archers are going to need 1,000 arrows, and when they let them deteriorate too much, they'll need 1,000 more. When you could have just made it one quiver to one axe to one.
Basically,
shield.
if you're a good warrior, you're never losing your axe, or you're losing it not very often.
Sure, true.
But if you're a good ranger,
theory,
your arrows are being depleted no matter what. So you're forced to, a ranger is forced to engage in the economy much more than any other archetype at this point.
Yeah, maybe.
So
that's a very valid concern.
Where this is balanced out in Eve, everybody has missiles and guns and everything else where they constantly have to buy stuff. So I think there should be an equivalent for all archetypes. So all classes equally have to engage in the economy the same way.
Right.
So you have to think of the fantasy equivalent to arrows for warriors, whether it's like he has to eat a lot or
steroids.
Exactly, or something.
Definitely steroids.
Whetstones, or their armor breaks and they need some shit to like fix it or whatever,
exactly.
That type of thing. But again, it's not going to be exactly like an ammo system, but it's going to be maybe they take more durability hits. I don't fucking know. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do.
I will say I'm hoping that they at least like are listening and like my idea of a class where you can do ranged and it lets you do a whole bunch of burst of like really low cost abilities, but then you have to reload and that takes a while, and so people will otherwise go to melee. I really want that kind of hero too, where your range is just like throw it at them as fast as you can in as much volume as you can, but beware, because if you waste all that and then you have to reload, you're stuck with melee or something.
We're getting into the giant, I wish and I hope, armchair dev type of stuff right now. But the one thing I'll say is, this in a game like Eve, every single ship plays the same exact way. Essentially,
right?
You have a bunch of tools on it. Some move faster, some move slower. Some can take more hits or less hits or whatever. But they're all playing with the same resources, essentially. Some have just more resources than others. In a fantasy-based game, you have classes with rage, you have classes with mana, you have classes with stamina. I mean,
right.
The ArtCraft has a job, much like any other MMO creating classes, to create enough unique experiences so you want to play some other vessels. So
exactly.
Some classes have stealth and all this other stuff. They all have different tools, which is great. But I think you have to make it sure that all the vessels, archetypes, whatever, have a unique play style to them. Because you're actually playing them. You're not just watching boxes like you are in Eve. So
absolutely.
They need to be a little bit more unique than just giving all the casters mana, all the warriors a rage or a hatred, or based on damage or based on hits taken, or that's been done for quite a bit. So. You can, and I always bring this up because League of Legends does a pretty interesting job because they've got 140, 50 champs now, and they try to make them unique play styles.
Right.
And they moved away from having everything having mana. There's different kind of interesting things to gate your abilities or to gate resources, so it's just not like a free-for-all. And I think that's what ultimately ArtCraft is going to have to do. They're going to, once you start getting into like archetype number 20 or whatever down the road, they're going to have to think of some interesting combination of cool gameplay, I guess, or whatever.
Mage that recharges their ability based on the volume of the noise around you.
Something dumb like that, sure.
Exactly.
Yes. I think okay. So I think we hit our time here. We wanted to shoot for about 30-minute shows, I think, instead of an hour long. So we're not unless we go over for interesting conversation. But we're hitting about the 40-minute mark right now, which is pretty good. I think in 2 weeks there might be hopefully more updates, but I think we're probably going to end up rehashing out more of the update type of stuff and kind of thinking about giant what-ifs, because I don't think there's going to be any major updates between then and maybe a month from now, unless Siege Perilous comes out pretty quickly. We can start talking about destruction and how that kind of incorporates into games, because there's a whole lot of stuff that I can talk about with that. But
yeah, I'm excited for more details on that.
I am very much stoked. So right now my wish list of looking forward into Crowfall development is, because now we're getting into the minutia, I think, is, can we tighten up that combat and make it a fun gameplay experience for everybody? And that's going to vary. I've seen streams where people are playing it and they're moving pretty crisp and going, I'm like, you must have a really good trace right to the servers, because I can never get gameplay like that out of my client. So I hopefully that tightens up so I can get more enjoyable time in the game. And two, I can't wait, like I said, for the destruction stuff, because that's what's going to make this game a little unique. So I think you agree with fun stuff coming up?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys, so we're going to have another show 2 weeks from now. Let me bring up my calendar. I don't know what the date is going to be. It is the 26th, which is good because I'll be away on business the first week of February. So that's excellent. We're not going to miss a show that way. So 26th, Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern. Hopefully Lakes is going to be with us. Going to be back to a 3-man show. We want to thank everybody out there for watching. You can find us on YouTube. I'm going to be manning up Twitter, so excuse me for screwing that up. I'm not very good with Twitter. I'm good at reading Twitter, but not actually engaging in Twitter. But I'll keep it open. So if you want us to see shows during the week that we're not putting a show, kind of like a chill out, kind of whatever, maybe myself will just hop on for like a half hour talking about different stuff by myself, or Doc maybe can do that or whatever. If we get enough, what threshold of tweets should we do to actually do a show on an off week or a after show?
Good question.
You want to set it at 15?
Yeah, that seems like a decent number to arbitrarily pick.
Just throw it out there. So if enough of you guys want to do a show next week, light up Twitter and maybe we'll pop on. It might not be exactly at 8:30. It might be a little bit later. Or for me, it's better to do it later at night anyway, around 10 o'clock Eastern. This way, everything around the household is kind of settled down a little bit. Rather than 8:30.
And speaking of, if people are going to tweet suggesting that we have an off-week show, give us some reasoning, like what big topic is out.
Yes, that'd be nice too.
To talk about. Not just we miss you, although obviously.
Yes, especially with your bow tie.
Yeah,
that's now your staple.
Bow tie Tuesday.
I'm gonna have to start wearing my shirt on backwards again, because that could be my thing. But no, I love doing the after shows because it's something that we can just kind of hang out. But that would have to be more with community engagement. I don't want to come on here and just kind of like, hey, yeah, we got an update. I'll open up GameVox. If you can get a couple people on just kind of shooting the shit, we'll do it. But it's not going to be me here with a camera in my face, like reading Twitch chat like all night. That's going to be kind of silly. So if you want to do it, you're going to have to hop on GameVox and we can hang out and talk about the game. So anyway, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching, and look for us out there. Catch you tonight, guys. Later.